A combat-based RPG without bosses would be like having a bowl of pasta noodles without really anything else. Sure, it can fill you up and it can honestly be quite tasty, but wouldn't you want to add more flavor and essence to it all? Bosses are one of the things that make this game so unique and interesting, in my personal opinion, especially with the way that they have been designed and created for players to face them. They are the reason why our favorite support, sustain, and DPS characters can thrive and feel incredible to play as. Star Rail has no shortage of these, honestly, from regular elites to mainstream bosses and even weekly bosses that we know as Echoes of War. The game developers have made them all feel so memorable and unique that I personally adore them so much, and it's just absolutely amazing. Throughout this video, I want to go over the concept of Star Rail's in-game bosses as a whole. As always, we will be going over gameplay, flavor, and impact that these bosses have been able to provide for the game and why they are incredible. For more context on these categories, please feel free to watch my video on Star Rail's best designed characters. But in short, gameplay refers to anything related to the combat system of Star Rail. This would mean their passive talents, their skills, their abilities, anything that does damage. Flavor is more so anything that is not combat based. So this would be more than anything their sound effects, their animations, what they do, how they look, their aesthetics. And last but not least is impact, which would refer as to how much they have affected the lore of characters, of the story, of the world as a whole, and what they provide to the game itself. With all that being said and out of the way, let us see how Star Rail perfected bosses. To start things off, I want to separate all the bosses that we currently have in the game into 3 different categories, these ones being elites, bosses, and echoes of war. And we will be going in detail over all 3 of these categories, starting off with elites, which I feel is the one that needs most explaining given how probably some of you all may not even consider them to be bosses, with how easy they are to beat sometimes, and especially because if you have the correct team comp, you can just easily destroy them. After all, getting ascension materials from Stagnant Shadows and relics from Caverns of Corrosion has never really been that big of a deal, or like it hasn't really been that hard to begin with. That being said though, I do feel like they should be at least considered mini bosses, as minimum. Elites can be found in different locations throughout the game, but most notably, I like the fact that they are added as sometimes story progression checks, where you can move forward after having beaten some of them. And one of the most notorious examples of this would be the waves of enemies that we face after the Tingyun incident, where the last fight is against a Maristruck Ascended that introduces to us the debuff known as Prana Siphon, where an ally just gets gray HP, and they would not be able to recover this gray HP unless you cleanse the debuff, effectively reducing your maximum HP temporarily. Couple this with the fact that they can apply a DOT with Wind Shear that can stack up to 5 times, and you have a horrifying enemy that can spike up your anxiety in no time. And honestly, every elite has their own mechanic that just makes them so unique and that I adore. For example, Void Ranger Tramplers love to point their arrows at you before they deal massive damage and delay your action with Entanglement. Frigid Prowlers love to summon those annoying Ice Fragmentum soldiers that delay your actions before literally eating one of them so that they can empower their attack and deal massive damage. The Malefic Apes target whoever uses their skill last, and after 3 attacks they enter a cooldown mode. And the Dream Jolt Troop Elites, honestly, they're just funny little guys. The dinosaur being allergic to all sorts of DOTs is absolutely beautiful for me because I am an Nihility main. And the Sweet Gorilla is incredibly obnoxious because you do have to bounce back those shields. And while I am also a Gepard main, I still hate the fact that that gorilla is really annoying and doesn't have an ice weakness. So that is another moment of me having a bit of annoyance. He does summon the Bloodhounds, which is really nice because they deal physical damage when they explode, and that actually damages the gorilla's shield. So I will give him that as a bonus. The dinosaur also likes to just, when, you know, if you don't make him explode, he does massive damage, but I don't face it, but I know some people have, and if you have been hit by that like massive area of effect attack, it's awful. It deals a lot of damage. It deals more damage than like one feels like they should. But yeah, I'm like rambling on far too much, I feel, so apologies for that. But the other thing that I do adore of these elites is how you can find them in the overworld just casually when they're guarding treasure chests in certain areas, and in order to claim these rewards you have to beat them. So it just feels so nice, especially because I'm not sure if it's just me, but I feel like they buff up their stats for this particular fights in order for you to get those stellar jades, and that just makes it be more meaningful. That being said though, those buffs are genuinely no match for what they did to them in Simulated Universe. In Simulated Universe, normally you get to beat up some forms of elites at 2 different landmarks on your way to the final boss, and they give you some rewards for clearing them, as well as being able to retrieve some planar spheres and rope sets. However, the main focus I want to drag everyone's attention to is not the elites in the regular Simulated Universe, because these for the most part are just your average elite with a very minor stat boost, but rather I want to focus on those in the game modes of Golden Gears and Swarm Disaster. These 2 game modes provided us with a plethora of content for us to tackle and struggle against, as well as the addition of many quote-unquote new bosses into the game in the form of bug versions, which, may I add, is so fitting for Simulated Universe given how these enemies are likely not supposed to interact in these ways, hence why they are bugs and stronger because they go against the original programming. If anything, I am going to blame Aha for this one, because as far as I remember, he's the only simulated Aeon to break code and the 4th wall within the confines of the Simulated Universe. But I am getting distracted though, so let's get back on topic and see why these particular elites are so unique and different in comparison to their normal counterparts. We will compare them with some of the previously mentioned elites that I highlighted, these ones being the Void Ranger Trampler, the Frigid Prowler, the Malefic Ape, and since neither of Penacony's elites have bug versions currently, I'll be using the Ascended and the Silvermane Lieutenant for these examples. I want to start off with the 2 oldest of the enemies that we have, this one's being the Lieutenant and the Void Ranger, because while their kits did not change when they became bugs, their behaviors did. Void Rangers will now use their super move much more often, where they target you and then shoot that massive CC arrow. From my experience, they have done that to me 3 times in a row, which honestly feels insane, especially if they hit the wrong unit. Like, if they hit my support or like my healer, I know that I genuinely do run the risk of losing that run, because afterwards they can just shoot my DPS and just squish them in a second. That being said, the other character, being the Lieutenant, is very interesting because rather than spawning 2 Silvermane units, they'll go ahead and spawn 4. And while sure, maybe he has more numbers, okay, like what about it? When he enters his own counter stance, it's much more horrifying. Because while there are other Silvermane lieutenants, not lieutenants, like any other Silvermane guard units on the field, the Silvermane lieutenant will keep his shield up, so he will be able to do his super move, Pierce, over and over and over and over again if you're not careful and if you're attacking an AoE. And in Simulated Universe, these enemies can delete you if you're not careful enough, so it's just rough. The amount of times that I have lost runs because I was running Jingliu and I wasn't careful, because you know, Jingliu has to use the AoE move when she's in her enhanced form. So that was very, very rough for me. Moving on, we have the Malefic Apes, and I will rant a bit about these ones because these guys have been the bane of my existence. As previously stated, this enemy normally attacks 3 times and then goes into his cooldown period. However, the bug version decides to be a little quirky instead, and reinvented the whole system that he runs by. Rather than gaining 3 stacks of Augusto at the very beginning before he starts attacking, this individual will start at 0 stacks, and every time you use his skill, he will gain a stack. Mind you, they still will be targeting the last person to use their skill, but this time when they attack, they will consume all of the stacks at once, and every stack is essentially buffing up their damage by 66% per stack. So they do massive damage to whatever poor soul is unlucky enough to be the target of that attack. And I have had many times when I have been refusing to use my own skills during that period of time, and it's been absolutely horrendous. And on top of that, which just, you know, like they already swapped the formula, making him a bit harder, especially if you're not prepared or you're not like paying attention. But they also decided that one of his moves would not be an AoE roar that deals damage to your entire party, and it has decimated me so many times. So I do apologize for this long rant, and I really just had to get that off my chest. This ape has been a run ender for me so many times. In the case of the Frigid Prowlers though, these individuals will now summon 4 Fragmentosaurus as opposed to 2, which is obnoxious because their action delaying attacks are just awful to deal with at times. But on top of that, this guy decides to, rather than consume one of his allies, he will consume all of his allies, making him do massive damage for every single one that he has eaten. Especially if he eats 2, because for some reason if he eats 2, that second wave will do a lot of damage. And also, I want to add the fact that this guy is immune to getting frozen. So if you don't have the correct blessing upgraded in your run, and if you find this individual when you're running a full ice team of remembrance, you just lose. Because I have lost many times, and this has just been so far trauma dumping on you guys, and I apologize. But I feel like, yeah, a lot of this has been from my personal experience. But again, this is why I adore this game. But anyways, finally, the last one that I want to cover are the Ascended, which not only are already annoying in and of itself with them having the Prana Siphon debuff, but now when they deal damage, they will apply that same amount of Prana Siphon to your life. Meaning that cleanses are needed so much more than before, and these enemies really just do not care about if you have a shield or not. Because you could be at max HP with an 8,000 shield, for example, but if they do like 2,000 damage, that 2,000 damage will appear in your health bar in the form of that gray bar. And dear God, it is so horrifying. Especially because I'm pretty sure I have been at moments where my health bar has been 80% gray, and it is panic inducing because I know that the moment that that shield drops, if it drops at the wrong time, I can just be easily dead. But yeah, like no, legitimately, even though they have done this to make the bosses more interesting, harder, and overall just enhance the experience of you facing these much more difficult opponents, since you do have blessings to counteract all these things. The one thing that does scare me, and I have been experiencing much more than usual, has been the Berserk mechanic. Now, probably some of you guys haven't seen the Berserk mechanic, or you might not see it that often, but ever since I started doing Golden Gears, I have seen that tag appear far more than I am comfortable with. Berserk is essentially a state that activates after 20 cycles have passed, and you don't know how many cycles have passed because the game doesn't show in cycles. You just kind of have to calculate it by yourself, which is a bit horrifying if I do say so myself. And the main thing of Berserk is that every single time that a cycle passes once they enter Berserk mode, they will do 40% more damage, and then another 40%, and so on and so forth, infinitely. until you perish. And this is the way for Star Rail to essentially tell you, no, you are not allowed to turtle and just survive by being purely a defensive stance, because otherwise it's just gonna get dull, I feel. And I do like how they encourage you to just go more aggressively than just turtle up and, I don't know, like beat the game with just like Quake bounces. Though, to be fair, I feel like the preservation path deals so much damage. The one path that I genuinely have had struggles with this, I feel, has been with abundance. I don't understand well how abundance works, so that's just a me problem. That's a skill issue on my end. But I do adore the fact that all these mechanics are essentially encouraging us to play more aggressively and try to actually plan around the patterns in order to not, you know, reach Berserk state. Because when you reach Berserk state, it's gonna be a bad time. Moving on to bosses that are actually classified as bosses, we have a much shorter pool of enemies, but much deeper potential that has me so freaking hyped and excited for the future of this game, honestly. In this roster of enemies, we have, in order, Gepard, Bronya, Mr. Zverog, Cocolia, Kafka, the Ebon Deer, Yanqing, the Swarm's True Sting, Argenti, Stellaron Hunter Sam, and the Memory Zone meme, something unto death. From this list, there are a few things that I wish to highlight, mainly how out of all of these boss fights, 4 of them do not have their own boss theme, which is a little bit screwed up if I do say so myself. 6 of these are playable characters, with one of them having been a boss fight before her official release, which honestly gives me so much hope and hype for the potential of Sam being a playable character, a fire one at that given his entire animations. And in particular, from this pool of 6 characters, 2 of these make me so excited for future fights that we may face throughout our trailblazing journey. But first, I want to go over the 5 bosses that are not playable characters and why I adore them so much, these ones being Sam, Cocolia, the Ebon Deer, the Swarm, and the Memory Zone meme. I like all these boss fights for different reasons and the mechanics that they bring into the game that are just honestly so amazing in my personal opinion. Sam gave relevance to my Gepard once again because I had more reasons to actually use him for sustain, and that way being able to ignore Sam's aura where he reduces healing effects, which was absolutely destroying me, and it encouraged me to play Gepard more aggressively than I usually do. Cocolia feels like a menacing boss fight with how often she's able to just freeze you and how broken her AoE charge attack is that you always run the risk of getting one-shot by, especially because Bronya has the ability to move forward her action 100% and buff her damage, you know, like Bronya does. But it's horrifying because that makes it so that Cocolia's 2-turn attack becomes a 1-turn attack that is also buffed. And that is just incredibly scary. The Ebon Deer, it traumatized me and it made me have to both play more aggressive than I usually did and also to just plan around it, because I couldn't really beat the amount of branches that it was spawning, so my resort was just to tank the hit. What else could I think of? I just saw that the golden fruit made it so that all of his branches broke away, and my plan was just, I'm gonna survive that hit and then beat the hell out of it, and that is what worked for me. So I appreciate the deer for that. The Swarm Disaster's True Sting made me so I had to plan more around dealing with little underlings, because I do not know about you guys, but I just feel like these guys can easily overwhelm you when you're not really thinking about it, because each and every single one of these guys can apply you different wind shear. So you can have up to 5 different stacks of wind shear, all of them being stacked up 5 times. And that is really horrifying when I was thinking about it and just how much damage I have sustained and how many times I've gotten one shot by just the DOT alone. And last but not least, something unto death. But we all know why he's being memorable. But yeah, I just hope that nobody brings Robin or any victim that has been stabbed by this thing into like the boss fight that this guy has, because otherwise, yeah, no, I don't wanna see that again. I want to be reminded of the incidents. But overall, it's a mechanic that is very fun, and I do like how they put them in a little pod that you have to rescue them, and when you rescue them, they come back with full energy. So I like to send my Jeopard there. I'm sorry, Jeppy, but it's the best way for me to sustain against that thing, and it's the way that I have found more efficiently for me to be able to beat the Memory Stone meme, even though it is for fun. Now, as for the group of playable characters, these are the guys that have me the most excited, because we already know their kits already, but it is so cool how they were able to enhance their powers to fit them into a boss fight, such as Jeopard and Bronya summoning Silvermane troops to aid them, Svarog summoning different robots and the robotic hands to assist him, Kafka using her Spirit Whisper, Yanqing using multiple swords, and Argenti getting his animations much prettified, but also the statues that represent his offense, his defense, and his devotion for Goddess Drilla that ends up buffing him, which is just, it's so good. Like, every aspect of these characters beyond who they are gets shown in the boss fights, and it's purely perfection to me. Honestly, this is probably the reason why the three characters that are here in Jeopard, Yanqing, and Svarog / Clara made it so high in my preference list for the best characters in Star Rail. But genuinely, these fights have just been so amazing, and I adore them because not only do we face them in the story, but also through Memory of Chaos, Pure Fiction, Simulated Universe, as they're just cool and interesting fights, and I like how at times I do have to plan my teams around them. However, I did want to highlight two particular characters from this roster, and it is both Bronya and Yanqing, because of the way that their fights are designed. Starting off with Bronya's fight, it feels like there isn't really much there to be desired. After all, her fight is not really her own boss fight, due to the fact that she is a Harmony character whose main role is to just play support rather than actually be the aggressive one. However, I would like to argue this is the opposite, because Bronya opens up the ability for other support characters to have bosses in and of itself. After all, we did see how she got added into the Cocolia fight whenever she enters her second phase, and honestly, I find Bronya to be more problematic than Cocolia herself, so I do have to target Bronya first, and it sucks, but otherwise I get deleted and I just get obliterated, because that 2-turn lethal move that Cocolia handles just becomes a 1-turn kill and it gets even buffed up. So I cannot let Bronya have a turn usually, otherwise I will never have a turn. And essentially this just makes me think of the possibility of having characters such as Sparkle or even Ruan Mei as potential enemies, since we know very little of them and they're morally gray to a certain extent. I feel like Ruan Mei is more morally gray, even though I hate her, and Sparkle is very concerning, so I don't know, but it opens up the possibility, and that's what I like. That being said, Yanqing opens the door for any and all characters in Star Rail to be possible boss fights in the future, and that is why I adore him so freaking much. Now, I will admit that me claiming that Yanqing being the one element that opened the door to the possibility of all of the Star Rail roster to potentially become a boss fight sounds very outlandish. Now, before you go into the comments and start saying that I lose my mind, do hear me out for a second, okay? Think about it. Why did we even fight Yanqing? The Trailblazer was nowhere near where the fight was happening. In the story, we really had no reason to be fighting this child at the moment of the fight, excluding, you know, the Kafka companion mission. The only reason we fought him is because there was conflict between Dan Heng and Blade. Otherwise, there was legitimately no reason for us to be fighting them. At the end of the day, we were playing in the perspective of both Blade and Dan Heng in the moment. So what is stopping Star Rail developers, like narratively speaking, from letting us take control of another character for a segment of the story? We did that for certain parts in the Shensu Lao Fu quest where we took control of Dan Heng. We did that for the Yanqing story companion mission. I almost call it a story quest for a moment. It is possible. So why not? Maybe we can even fight bosses from the past. The possibilities are genuinely endless, and I adore that. This gives them so much freedom to just make these be permanent fights and put them into Memory of Chaos, put them into Simulated Universe, Pure Fiction, and I adore that so much. Legitimately, because of Yanqing and Bronya, this opens up so many possibilities, and there literally are like 1,000 ideas that are rushing into my mind, and it is insane. Like, for example, imagine that fight against Dan Heng in Bybetter Lune, or have him transform midway through the fight in between phases because we were taking control over Blade, or I don't know, somebody's attacking Herta space station, so now we have to fight Arlen, Asta, and Herta, and like some weird kind of boss fight where, I don't know, if I was to like design it, for example, I would just make it so that Arlen is designed to take hits for Asta, so he would purposely redirect hits into himself as a destruction character. I don't know. Or heck, what else do we have? We could have fights against Silverwolf, which had that move where she literally deleted a member of the Antimatter Legion out of existence. Why not? We can even add the little chibis that she has in her splash art to finally give them screen time, because I really need those little guys to have some screen time. Heck, she can even be designed to, rather than, you know, all the bosses buff themselves up as like the turns progress in Simulated Universe, why not just let her infinitely debuff you to the point that you literally do no damage? Like, that would be so fitting for like a Nihility character. Even then, it's just, it brings so much to the table, and I'm just here going wild, and I'm like reading parts of the script. I like literally said goodbye to this segment of the script because I'm just wanna show how much I genuinely adore like this idea of like potentially fighting the full set of the Landau siblings. And you know what, you might as well add Pela in there because she's like so close to Lynx, Serval, and Japard. And you know what that would make it like be? It would be literally a 4v4, and it would be insane. Imagine like you having your party of 4 characters against a party of 4 quote-unquote fully built characters that you're fighting. It's not necessarily a PvP, but it would feel like a very major boss fight. And I will admit that I'm kind of ripping off this idea of Shin Megami Tensei, especially because Shin Megami Tensei has liked to bring up main protagonists from other franchises into the game. More than anything, the one that immediately comes to mind that probably some of you might have seen in Shin Megami Tensei 5, one of the secret bosses, if you bought the DLC, is the Demi-Fiend, the playable character from Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. And that is wild, because that guy literally has a whole party and he can switch like his demons and everything, and it is insane. So what is stopping us from having that kind of experience as well? Imagine fighting the Thunderlord. That would be insane, and that would be horrifying. The one that I feel like I would panic a lot, and this is one of the reasons why I low-key wouldn't want this to happen, is imagine that there's like a tense moment. I'm not sure who would be these characters, but you know what, let's just put Luocha in there and Welt in 2 different sides. And of course with Welt, there's Himeko. And plot twist, you don't get to play as Welt and Himeko, but rather you get to play on the side that Luocha is. This isn't in this scenario that Luocha is like Auto Apocalypse and other shenanigans. I'm not too savvy on the lore, I apologize, but just imagine that. Imagine having a scene where you think you're gonna fight the main bad guy, but instead now you're being forced to play as the bad guys to take down Welt and Himeko. It would be a sick boss fight. but it would leave you absolutely demolished. And I love that idea and I hate that idea, and at the same time it's a lot of wishful thinking, and I know it would like divide everything into many freaking pieces. But I think that would make me absolutely keep on adoring this game forever, even though I know the repercussions of several of these scenarios would be catastrophic as hell. But yeah, genuinely sorry there for a little bit of me like having my mind just go brrr all over the place, because I don't know, I really want that. But beyond that, let's move on into the video. And the last thing that I want to talk about these bosses is that, you know, I stated before that 4 of these don't have their own boss music, and these ones are Bronya, Gepard, normal Cocolia, and the Swarm's True Sting. And it does disappoint me that they don't have their own OST, but I guess it makes sense to a certain extent, because Bronya and Gepard were added so early into the game that, one, I don't think they even had it planned to give them music for their own boss fights, and 2, I feel like it would have been too overwhelming having to have fight like Gepard and Bronya with their own music when you're trying to settle into the music of Jarilo 6 as a whole. Then, as for Cocolia, I can understand why she doesn't have a boss fight either, like a boss fight music either, because her song is Wildfire. So you don't, in my mind, I wouldn't want to make my players get confused which is the boss fight of Cocolia. So I can understand that. And the Swarm was added in Simulated Universe, which they don't have unique boss music. So again, I can kind of understand that. So I don't know. Also in my mind, right? Like, you can also associate the Swarm now to the Emanator of Propagation, which is a really cool OST. By the way, I really fucking adore it. And yeah, if anything, I do want to encourage some of you guys to listen to some of the music that this game has to offer with the bosses, because we don't get to listen to them, honestly. Like, we just hear them the one time we fight them, and then it is never really brought up again. So I do want to take this opportunity to just showcase some of them. I personally am a big fan of the Memory Zone meme and Argentis OST. I listen to them while I'm at work, so I really hope that you enjoy all the songs, and I'm even gonna post their names somewhere on the screen so you guys can hear the snippet and know what song it is, so you can look it up for yourself later if you so desire. I hope you enjoy. That last one, I adore so freaking much. Last but not least, we have the Echoes of War, which I will admit is the group of bosses that I feel like I have the least to talk about. From this category of bosses, we only really have 4, but honestly, each and every single one of them has made themselves be incredibly memorable on their own right. In this list, we have the Doomsday Beast, Cocolia, Mother of Deception, Phantylia the Undying, and Star Crusher Swarm King Scarabas. I completely butchered that name, I apologize. As we all know, all of these have been, at one point, a major boss fight that we had to face through our journey. Specifically, that annoying beetle that I know that took me and many other people a lot of tries to beat, because not everybody was prepared for that thing. I know it took me at least like 4 to 5 tries to properly arrange my team to beat that individual. But regardless, they were essentially story checks in order for us to further develop the plot, and I really enjoy that. Though I will admit that the Doomsday Beast felt more like a tutorial boss fight rather than an actual boss fight in the first experience, due to the nature of just how the story was and how the fight was essentially scripted to happen before we got access to gacha pools and before we could even like farm for relics or things as such. So well, it didn't really feel like a boss fight in and of itself. Once you do the Echo of War, I feel like it really did feel like one, and I genuinely adore that, because it did feel menacing, especially with the fact that they have the action values turned off during that boss fight, because that is how it is by default. And it does feel like you have to try to slay it as quickly as possible before it stands up. But once you turn on the action values, you realize he has a 999 delay in his next action, so he's never getting a turn anyway, so you can take as long as you want, which I just thought it was a cool little detail. In the case of Cocolia, Mother of Deception, she really was the perfect ending for the Belobog chapter, but also the build-up towards the fight was like absolutely incredible. The fact that we have to go to this very snowy and abandoned hill where I believe it was like a robot that was desecrated and no longer functioning was absolutely spectacular. The way that they build up the tension for the Stellaron was insane, but it's just the main thing that I liked about it was how we obtained the power of the preservation by gaining the lance of Alicia Rand, and essentially with the past of Belobog destroy the Stellaron crisis, or at least put a temporary end to it, right? And I don't know, it just felt narratively speaking so perfect, especially with how they built up the song. The fact that we went from Wildfire in an instrumental version to suddenly the screams of the lyrics was just, it was top tier. And I personally just adore that so much. As for Phantylia, however, this one I'm a bit intrigued by, because everything in the build up towards Phantylia was really interesting, especially because the way that we get introduced to her is the most screwed up way possible, and it is when we realize that Tingyun is not actually Tingyun. And that is just terrifying. It is trauma inducing to a certain extent. It is a mental wound that is never gonna leave us. Like, we're gonna spend so much time traveling worlds, everything and all, and we will always remember, oh, Tingyun got like their neck snap. So what's stopping an enemy from just deleting one of our favorite characters? And you know what? It became true when we reached Penacony, because now we were afraid for Firefly and Robin. So I'm just concerned for the future. And like, legitimately, if they want to bring Phantylia back at any point, everybody's gonna be memeing around the fact that, like, you know, like Tingyun was the first. But what happens if there's another victim when we least expect it? And there's nothing to remind us constantly of Phantylia per se. We know she exists, we know she's still there, but we do not know when she's gonna return. We do not know where she even went to hide, because we never got to slay her. We only temporarily made her go away. And that is a worry that you always have to have in the back of your mind. She could have left the Shanzhou Laofu. She could have gone to another one of the Shanzhou ships. She could have gone to another Shanzhou, like not Shanzhou planet, to another planet as a whole. And when we least expect it, we might just have another neck snap. And I don't know, just having that in the back of my mind is anxiety enough. And I do feel like that is a good way to build a character. Last but certainly not least, we have Star Crusher, Swarm King, Scarakabaz. I am exaggerating that so much because it is very hard to read their name. But genuinely speaking, I think that the way that they wrote him has been intriguing. And the reason why I say that is because we didn't really, I mean, we had to do the continuance quest, but at the same time, it's just concerning because it is an emanator that we essentially slayed. It wasn't a fully fledged out emanator because we were able to defeat it, I feel, canonically on our own, but it is something to be worried about, because what happens if the true Swarm King does end up respawning? And this might be a bit of like metagaming to a certain extent, right? Because one of the things that you notice when you look at his title, it says his entire name between parentheses, synthetic. And that synthetic is what makes me concerned, because what happens if we actually get to face the real deal? In game, they always give certain parentheses to certain enemies. Like I mentioned before, the bug versions in Simulator Universe were already enhanced versions. You also have the complete versions for bosses that I completely forgot to talk about earlier. So that is a my bad moment. But yeah, no, like they exist and they're like, again, enhanced. So in this case, for the Swarm King, the one without title could just be an even more empowered boss fight with like maybe a new mechanic, maybe like a new phase, like a third phase that we don't know about. And I don't know, it leaves me intrigued, but that is just me probably looking too deep into things. Regardless though, the way that they introduced it to us, the way that the Swarm King just fell from the sky and the Trailblazer turns around with her bat and just hits them right before the screen cracks and the battle begins is perhaps one of my favorite things from that quest. So, just peak design in my personal opinion. And the song, the freaking song that this freaking bug has is such a banger that it makes me hate the fact that I have to fight these things constantly, because the song is so good. I just don't like fighting the Emanator of Propagation because it irks me a little bit. But yeah, with all that being said, I really don't have much more to talk about with these bosses, but I also do want to do the same thing that I did with the previous segment of bosses, which is I want to leave you guys with just brief snippets of the songs, because I know that everybody likes Wildfire and everybody adores Wildfire, but I don't really see many people give that much credit to the other songs. I mean, I have heard people give adoration to the Fentilia OST, but personally speaking, maybe also because of the type of music that I listen to, but the Doomsday Beast and the Emanator of Propagation are my favorite songs by miles. I just adore listening to them when I'm at work or when I'm grinding something. Just in general, it's nice and pleasant music for me to have in the back of my mind as I'm like coding, and I don't know, it just gets me pumped up and filled with energy for just tackling difficult tasks. So yeah, once again, I hope you'll enjoy.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate. Pain will come with the blade. Pain will wake up the despondent crowd.
Once again, genuinely some of my favorite OSTs in this entire game, and I don't know, I'm just a sucker for this music, and to the developers of the game, thank you very much for making such amazing masterpieces that I can listen to whenever I want. It is the best. being able to just honestly open up the game and just be on the couch and just listen to the music infinitely is one of my personal, just like, I don't know, just it's a little pleasure of mine that I like to do from time to time. So I have like way too much time logged into Star Rail because it just is my background music some days. But yeah. Okay, so I just finished watching this segment of the live stream that is related to Aventurine, and oh my god, I am very excited. There sadly were no new elites, but we are getting a new elite slash Echo of War. I'm not really sure, they didn't really specify, I think. I just know I was excited. I just adored the concept of how Aventurine looked like, and it is honestly insane. He looks sick. Also, I love the fact that they even display in the stream the fact that he's one of the 10 stone hearts, meaning that, hey, there could be a possibility of fighting other ones like Topaz, or I believe there was one Diamond, and I just feel like that is insane, incredible, wonderful, gets me very pumped up for, again, the future, because we might be able to fight the APC, who knows. It would just be insane. The only thing about fighting Topaz that I wouldn't like is that we would have to fight Numpy, and I would feel absolutely awful. So please, Star Rail, just don't do that. There are limits to what I want, even though I really want some very concerning things. That being said, though, the fact that Aventurine has the ability to essentially play blackjack against you is absolutely incredible. I love the fact that his gameplay revolves around dice, especially with the fact that one of his attacks is just him throwing a die that just keeps bouncing over and over between your opponents, so like between your allies. So now it literally is like, oh hey, you know what, remember how there's RNG in this game and how you're gonna hit me? Now there's gonna be RNG in how I'm gonna hit you. And I'm not sure what else there was, but like I remember there was also the fact that like he summons, well, to play the blackjack game mode, essentially he just summons 2 die, and then after a while he'll summon like a total of 4. So you want to bring characters that have like AoE, I think, and I'm just so hyped about it. And I also love the fact that every once in a while he will attack you back, just like the regular Aventurine in your party will attack the enemies back after reaching, I believe, 7 stacks. Which also, if you go over them, they don't just you don't just lose the stacks. Like with, I think, like I know that Himiko loses stacks, no Shuei loses stacks. So I'm glad that this time around, if you go like 9/7, now this time you will actually get to keep those like extra 2 little stacks. Great and amazing things that they did for this character. I absolutely love it, and I cannot wait to both fight this individual and struggle against this individual. And the main reason why I wanted him to be an elite is because not elite, why I want him to be like a regular boss is because I want to be able to face this guy in Simulated Universe, especially like whatever new version of Simulated Universe that they bring into the future, as well as being able to fight this guy in Memory of Chaos and in Pure Fiction. It would be so insane, it would be so hard, but it would be so much fun, even if I suffer. But yeah, that's the end of this like extra segment that I came up because I wanted to talk about live stream, and I'm glad that I did wait in posting this video to at least talk briefly about this, because I adore how they've been designing this whole thing. So just fighting a new boss, beautiful. Hey, if you have reached this far into the video, first of all, thank you very much for watching and hearing me yap about the design of bosses and just overall like what I'm wishful and what I hope for the future of Star Rail in regards to boss fights. I know that I went into massive tangents there for a moment, so I apologize, but I genuinely had so much fun making this video, and I hope to hear all of you guys' inputs, or maybe even like some boss fights, or how you would design like a boss fight in this game, because I don't know, I just love hearing people's ideas, what people would create if they were like just a game developer, or just an idea that they would love to see being implemented into the game. It's, I feel one of the elements of video games that I personally adore, and that's why I love these types of discussions, because as a community we get to like just grow and like think of ideas, and I don't know, it just makes me the happiest. And also, if you've watched like this far into the video, secondly, like you are insane, because this video at the moment of recording is like what, like over 46 minutes long, and this is before I have added any commentary about the live stream that is like relevant to bosses. So yeah, I mean, if you have reached like all the way to this video and like, you're hearing this little dialogue, you're the real one, and I really appreciate you very, very, very much. With that being said though, for those of you guys that are here, and if you are new, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. It really means a lot, and it really helps out the channel massively. I'm surprised, like genuinely we have reached over 850 subscribers, which just blows my mind away. This mean that like we need roughly 150 subscribers in order to be able to apply to YouTube Partner, which is like such a massive milestone, something that I genuinely didn't think would be like a possibility, but it is because of all of you guys. So I'm just glad that you guys are here with me, and like you all are been so supportive. You all have been leaving just comments about like what you guys have been adoring, and I don't know, I'm happy that we are building this like corner of the community that has been absolutely great and wonderful. So thank you very, very, very much. With all that being said though, I hope you'll have a great and amazing rest of your days, and that you have a good morning, good night, good afternoon, whatever time zone applies to you in the moment that you're watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.